Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Ece Algan, and I am on behalf of the Center for the Studies of Muslim and Arab Worlds. I welcome you all to this film screening of The Truth Lost at Sea, which will be followed by a Q&A with the film director Rifat Aude, who is joining us via Zoom from Jordan. Thank you so very much, Rifat, for joining us. Before I introduce him, I would like to acknowledge the land that we are working in and living in. We recognize that California State University San Bernardino sits on the territory and ancestral land of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, Yoahavitam. We recognize that every member of the California State University San Bernardino community has benefited and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1965. Consistent with our values of community and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold California State University San Bernardino more accountable to the needs of American Indian and indigenous peoples. Well, I want to remind everyone that we are co-sponsoring two amazing events as well. So just a reminder for our upcoming events. So the first one is a film screening and fundraiser organized by the Critical Refugee Studies Collective and hosts of departments and student organizations from URC and UCSD. And will take place on November 14th, which is, this coming Tuesday, from 3:30 till 5. And the second one is a panel entitled Weaponizing Anti-Semitism. Judith Butler will be one of our speakers, along with Professor Feldman, Professor Mutaseb, and will be moderated by Professor Kill. And that is, as you can see from the poster, it's going to be the following Tuesday from 2 to 4. I would, for this event, I would like to thank our co-sponsors, the PAM Caucus, Palestine Arab and Muslim Caucus, which the caucus is a part of the Council on Social and Racial Justice of the California Faculty Association. Thank you also, Strategic Communication, ATI, especially Tin Lee, for all their invisible labor to help us put together this event. Let me briefly introduce our center, which is housed in the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences of the California State University San Bernardino. It is an interdisciplinary collaboration between several colleges on campus. Our mission is to systematically decolonize knowledge production on issues related to what has been historically known as the Muslim and Arab worlds. In that spirit, our event this afternoon is an anti-colonial narrative to widely held myths in the United States about the Palestinian struggle and Gaza in particular. And we thought this is, of course, very important during this very time when the dominant narrative in the US paints a picture as if the violence in Gaza, the current violence in Gaza, started on October 7th. And it is, of course, quite problematic when now all the discussions about the Israeli-Palestinian situation has only happens when there are Israeli casualties. So we kind of want to, as in our center, we want to bring attention to Gaza and contextualize violence. And we've been doing that for years. And it has become well. Thank you all for being with us and watching the film with us. Even though the film was made in 2017 and it captures the events from 2010, we could probably see such similarities between what was happening then and what is still happening now. Please, if you have any questions, use Q&A, because this is in a webinar format. We cannot, you cannot share your screen. However, if you have any questions, please put that in chat, and I will be happy to read your questions to Mr. Aude. And let's thank him for being here and sharing his documentary with us.
Thank you, Dr. Ece, and I hope that everybody can hear me okay. And I just wanted to thank you and thank the university for hosting this event, along with the partners and the co-sponsors hosting this event. I think, let me just say a few words in the meantime before anybody gets any questions ready. I want to thank you, as I said, and thank the attendees for watching this film. I think it is timely now to show a film like this, not only because of what is happening in Gaza currently, but because also we are seeing a repetition of the propaganda in the mainstream media again. And this propaganda in the media is actually what enables and emboldens the Israeli government and army to continue with its onslaught and genocide against the Palestinian people. And so the more people are aware of this type of propaganda, this brainwashing, this alteration of facts on the ground, the more people are aware of all of this, the better equipped they will be to fight all of this. And I also wanted to say that this film isn't only my film, it's the film of all of the survivors of the Freedom Flotilla. I could not have made this film without the heroic efforts of my fellow shipmates who risked their well-being and their lives to smuggle off a lot of the footage from the ship, and then allowed me to use that footage in the film itself. So I need to give credit where credit is due and thank them, all of them, for their efforts in making this happen as well. And so if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them. I noted that somebody did ask already if this film was made recently, and you alluded to the answer already. This film was actually made after the Freedom Flotilla of 2010, so it's not that recent, but it is timely now. I first released the film in 2017, and after 2017, it was updated again in 2018. And it's been through many community screenings and film festivals. And it has actually been at a community screening at the university, the California State University in San Bernardino before, actually 5 years to the day almost, in 2018. when I was hosted at the university as well there at the time. So it is a fortunate and unfortunate. Fortunate to be hosted again by the university, but unfortunate that we have to screen this film again because Israel continues to act with impunity in the international arena. So with those few words, I'd be happy to take any questions that anybody might have joining us, either at the university itself, any of the students, or anywhere around the world across the globe. Thank you.
Thank you, Rifat. Can I ask, since we have lots of students who are joining us, and since this is one of our, teaching events, can we start with like talking about what happened then in 2010? Why was there a blockade of Gaza? Why by Israelis? What had happened then? And because it's like not that many, ships organized through various humanitarian organizations will sail through the international waters just to, bring some humanitarian aid to Gaza. Just, if there was any other way, right, to deliver that. But what was really happening, and also what? Let's start with that one. Mm-hmm.
Sure. Well, I'll address that question about the blockade and why it exists. And really, there is no justification for a blockade like this, because this blockade is collective punishment on now 2.3 million people in Gaza. Now, just to give some historical background, many people think that the blockade began in 2006 and 2007. But what people fail to realize is that a partial blockade began actually on Gaza back in 1967, when the illegal military occupation began of the Gaza Strip. When this occupation began, there was a partial blockade of Gaza by sea. So since 1967, all the way up till approximately 2008, when the first boats were able to break the blockade, there was no connection between Gaza and the outside world through the sea, because the Israelis had blockaded Gaza by sea. What happened after that, after 1967, in 2006 and 2007, there were elections that took place in the occupied Palestinian territories, including Gaza. And these were free and fair elections, and the Palestinians voted Hamas into power. So what happened is that because they exercised a democratic right in electing their representatives, they were punished. They were punished for voting the wrong way. They were punished for voting people into power who they wanted, but not who Israel and the US wanted. And so a complete blockade was imposed on the people of Gaza. They were collectively punished for voting the wrong way. And of course, what this blockade meant is that no food, medicine, supplies, fuel, etc., could enter into Gaza unless it was approved by the Israeli authorities first. And we're talking about basic necessities of life here. We're not talking about anything that, me or you or other people don't have. And so what happened is that after this blockade, this full blockade was imposed on the people of Gaza, this collective punishment was imposed on them in 2006, 2007 for voting the wrong way, essentially. What happened is that there were attempts to break this blockade by sea. And a few boats were able to reach Gaza by sea in that time frame, around 2008. But after that, the Israelis decided that they would not let any other boats through, and that included our flotilla in 2010. And so what happened is what you saw basically in the film in 2010, when they attacked us with lethal force, killing 10 of our fellow activists.
thank you for, providing even a more background for our students to think about. And one of our students said, is this a part of what is happening today?
Yes. Well, what's happening today is basically the Palestinian people in Gaza, they are trying to break free from these chains that have been imposed on them. There is this blockade on Gaza, and nobody is allowed in or out of Gaza unless the Israelis let them. So many people have described this as the world's largest open air prison, including many UN officials and legal scholars worldwide. But actually, it's even more of a concentration camp than it is a prison. In prison, the prison authorities, you could say, are in charge of providing healthcare, of providing food, water, electricity. These are things, basic things, that are even denied to the people of Gaza. They are denied these basic things, these basic necessities of life. So it's much worse than a prison. It is indeed a concentration camp that people are trapped in, and that Israel is bombing now and committing genocide in.
I am a Turkish American, and I study media, Turkish media in particular, and Kurdish media as well. And I do remember distinctly when the boats, we were all glued to the television screens and watching carefully and pretty concerned. And I do remember how, American media tried to spin the events then, and which your documentary explains this beautifully. And so, and unfortunately, we see the similar type of spinning of the events today in the media. I'm trying to also monitor questions here. Do we have?
Yes, I put one in the chat.
Thank you. Oh, Falastina Ihmut asks, was it a scary experience when the Israeli soldiers stormed your boat?
Well, I get that question a lot, actually, at screenings, and the best way I can describe it is like the experience was as if we were watching a film or watching a movie, but we were inside the movie. It was surreal. So during the attack itself, and I don't understand why, I cannot explain it, but during the attack itself, we didn't feel scared. We were more in a state of disbelief, I guess, or shock, because we couldn't believe that they were attacking us with such deadly force. We had shown to the whole world that this was a peaceful mission. We had invited many journalists on board. We continued to broadcast from the ship because we wanted the world to see what was going on. And despite this, they attacked us with brutal force. So it was more a feeling of shock and disbelief than it was a feeling of fear. For me personally, I was one of the people who got blindfolded when the Israeli commandos had complete control of the ship. They had blindfolded me, and they tied my hands behind my back. Four commandos threw me to the ground and broke three of my ribs. And when I was blindfolded, that's when I felt a little scared because I didn't know what was going on around me. I was no longer able to see what was going around me. That's when I felt scared. It was after the attack, not during the attack. And I think it's because a person, with all the sounds going on around him and all the commotion and chaos, and when you're blindfolded, it's a factor of unknown. that factor of that unknown, how shall I put this? Not knowing what is going on around you is what scares you, I guess. And I think they know that. I think that's why they do blindfold people. And for anybody who's watched protests in occupied Palestine and see how the Palestinians are treated when they are arrested, you see that blindfolding them is a followed policy by the Israeli army. And they know this. They know the psychological effect of what blindfolding a person does, and that's why they do it. So that's the time when I felt afraid. But during the attack itself, no, I don't think, or I would say hardly any of us on the ship felt afraid.
Thanks for sharing that. And we have lots of beautiful words coming through the Q&A. For instance, Falastina Ihmud wrote, "I'm so sorry that you had to experience that." Amelia Esperza said, "Thanks for speaking up against injustice and genocide." Falastina Ihmud has a comment and a question. There is, of course, a media bias right now, but do you feel like there is a difference in how this occupation genocide is viewed because of social media?
Thank you. That's a good question. And I thank the participant also for the kind words. But I want to firstly stress that what I experienced is absolutely nothing compared to what the Gazans have been experiencing for the past 16 years and what they've experiencing, especially in the past few weeks. They are really in a living hell right now. They're just, bombs are falling all over on Gaza. Little children are being killed on a daily basis. I think I saw the number yesterday. On average, every single day, it's 130 to 150 children alone are being killed, in addition to all the other civilians. These numbers, I obtained them from a doctor who frequently goes to Gaza and is in touch with the doctors there at the Shifa hospital, the main hospital there. So what I experienced is nothing compared to what the people of Gaza are continuing to experience, and it's important to keep that in mind. In regards to how this occupation and genocide is viewed now because of social media, I think that people really are all over the world waking up more and more to what the Israelis have been doing. They're waking up more and more to the Israeli war crimes and violations of international law and the Geneva Conventions. And it's very important that people stay aware of this and continue to, promote this awareness among their friends, family, colleagues, co-workers, etc. And there is another thing that is very important to mention in regards to social media. Yes, we have been able to change the tide and change awareness because of social media, but it has been an uphill battle because there are many, many posts that are being taken down by the big social media giants, such as Facebook and otherwise. There are accounts that are being shut down across all types of social media. There are people who are getting fired from their jobs for speaking out against this genocide. And so, and needless to say, the mainstream media is silencing any Palestinian voices or silencing anybody who's trying to shed light on what is going on in Gaza, the genocide that's going on in Gaza. So yes, we have been able to change some awareness through social media, but it has been an uphill battle. The only reason that many social media entities have not been able to shut us down is because the evidence is so overwhelming of this genocide that is taking place that they can't. No matter how hard they try, they cannot shut us down. They cannot shut all of the voices down. We're always going to find ways to get the voices of the Gazan people out. And so I want to stress that it has been an uphill battle, and that's why I want to urge everybody here to continue to speak out, not to be afraid, whether you're an activist, a student activist on campus or otherwise. It's very important to keep speaking out because they want to try and capitalize on people's fear of being labeled unjustly as anti-Semitic. These are ridiculous claims, ridiculous accusations. They want to capitalize on people's fear of getting, expelled or fired from their jobs. So we need to push back and fight back and continue to speak out and continue to influence our politicians, our congresspeople, members of parliament, wherever we are in the world, so that there will be enough political pressure to stop Israel from undertaking this genocide.
Thank you for pointing that out. It's a very, very important point. We have a question from Mahmoud Mamani. He's saying, thank you for your bravery. To what extent do you think mainstream media can play a role in exposing the Israeli politics and aggression against Palestinians, especially people of Gaza? And could that contribute to holding Israel accountable for its crimes and constant aggressions?
Well, I don't think mainstream media will play a role in exposing Israeli politics and aggression. But I do think that alternative media, activists worldwide, and human rights organizations, and certain UN organizations can help expose Israeli politics and aggression against Palestinians, and especially the people of Gaza. And that is what could hold them to account. Mainstream media itself, I'm not hoping in the foreseeable future that they'll change their attitudes too much because of their political / corporate interests that they have. And when I say mainstream media, I'm referring to media like the Fox News of the world, the CNNs of the world, the BBCs of the world, these types of media outlets. However, there are very good other media outlets, very good alternative media outlets that do play a role, do play a positive, constructive role. And I think I saw them up on the screen a short while ago. And I hope that these media outlets can be shared again with everybody joining us today on Zoom, because these media outlets are actually quite good in conveying the facts on the ground and showing both sides of the story. So there is a list that we do have ready for this webinar, and hopefully it can be displayed again on the screen.
Thank you for pointing that out. What I've been observing the mainstream media as well as the alternative media about their coverage of Gaza. And I was quite surprised, actually. CNN and BBC News, Channel 4. These BBC News and Channel 4 are for the students in the audience. UK channels, mainstream channels like CNN. CNN even featured an American nurse who was so concerned about what was happening, and she had to come back because Dr. Without Borders couldn't keep her safe anymore because nobody is safe in Gaza. And she was describing the horrific events. So there are, to my surprise, as a media professor, I'm usually not quite, surprised about the coverage in American media regarding anywhere in the Gulf region, and about especially the Israel-Palestine situation. But I could see that they realize the devastation, the humanitarian devastation that's happening, and they do cover a little bit before. I've never seen them do that. So those little pockets of hope from the mainstream media, I don't know how effective they will be, but I'm glad that there is a little bit of that coverage going on right now. But of course, now that it is, over, is this the 34th day of the Israeli attack?
34th. Yes.
So they are doing it a bit late, but I think they also realize, because of the rallies going on everywhere in the United States and in the world, I guess they're trying to cover a little bit the nuanced, maybe, but there is, of course, a limit, right, to their understanding of nuanced coverage. It's still, at the end, there's constant justification of Israel's, right to self-defense, even though, and there is a question related to that. And I want to ask you what you think about this whole argument of Israel's self-defense argument, and also from an anonymous attendee, we have this question. What is your stance on the International Criminal Court and the UN and their silence in light of numerous violations?
Let me just comment on what you mentioned first before I tackle that question, please. Yes, I did see that interview of the nurse or the doctor, I'm not sure, I believe it was a nurse, on CNN, who was with Doctors with Borders, and she was able to leave Gaza. And yes, as you said, there are these little pockets or little glimmers of hope in the mainstream media, but the reason that the mainstream media is at a point where it has to show some of these voices is that they know that if they don't, they're going to lose all credibility that they have. At least this way, when they, highlight a voice here or there that was in Gaza, or a pro-Palestinian voice, or show actually what is going on, at least this way they can go back and say, oh, well, look, we featured this person on our show or that person on our show, just to save face, if you will. But I still believe that the editorial policy of the mainstream media giants is the same, and it is biased in favor of Israel. And anybody who's watched mainstream media news coverage can see this. It's glaringly clear. One of the good websites that I always like to refer back to that does studies on the media is the If Americans Knew website, ifamericans.knew.org. And they have some very good studies over there in regards to the media coverage on the Palestine-Israel conflict and what's taking place there. And it shows the bias in the media coverage and how, for example, Israeli deaths are covered 100% to 200% of the time, whereas Palestinian deaths are not covered at all in many instances. So when I say covered 200% of the time, it's like they would report on each Israeli death more than once or twice. And that would lead many viewers or many people to think that even more Israelis died than they really did. Whereas the number of Palestinians who have been killed far exceed the Israeli deaths by multiple times, but they're not covered. And so people think that nobody is dying on the Palestinian side, relatively speaking, whereas on the Israeli side, many, many more people are dying. But the reality is the exact opposite. So that's just one example that I could give. Now, getting back to your question about the International Criminal Court, whether or not there was a trial there regarding what happened with us, and what my stance is on the ICC and the UN and their silence. Unfortunately, it's very disappointing. We tried to get an investigation going at the ICC for what happened with us on the flotilla itself numerous times, and we failed numerous times. The prosecutor would not investigate the case of the flotilla. She said that it wasn't, at the time, the prosecutor at the time said that it wasn't of sufficient gravity to pursue an investigation. Our legal team appealed this decision more than once, And more than once, it went back to the prosecutor and she was told to revisit her decision, yet she stuck by it, unfortunately. And so it's reached a point where it's at a standstill now in the ICC. Personally, I'm not very optimistic that the ICC is going to do much for our case specifically, the flotilla case. But hopefully for the other atrocities that are taking place in Gaza now, hopefully things will change and the ICC will step up. I've been disappointed with the ICC so far on its inaction or silence in regards to Israeli crimes.
I'm just checking if there are any more questions. I guess not. Is there there's one comment from an anonymous attendee. The Western powers do not press the ICC to become involved in any potential war crimes or crimes against humanity perpetrated by Israel, which has always enjoyed impunity no matter what it does. This has given the extreme right government of Benjamin Netanyahu a green light to act as it pleases in Gaza, whatever the cost to Palestinians who live there.
I agree.
Mm-hmm. Would you, since again we do have students in the audience, would you like to comment on pogroms that have been going on in Palestinian land?
Well, yes, I'm glad you actually brought that up. It's a very good point to understand the current situation in Gaza, in Palestine right now, because many people seem to think, due to the misleading comments and remarks in mainstream media, many people seem to think that all of this started on October 7th. It didn't start on October 7th. This has been going on for decades. What's been going on in Palestine has been going on for decades. Palestine used to be a land where, people from all religions and faiths, Muslims, Christians, Jews, lived in harmony side by side until the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. And for 75 years, the Palestinians have been suffering as a result of this apartheid state. Israel, as a state, was built on massacres. It was built on ethnic cleansing and ethnic displacement of the native Palestinian people. And there were many massacres that took place against the Palestinians throughout decades, and these are well documented. I would advise anybody who wants to learn more quickly about the issue of Palestine to read Ilan Pappé's book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, in which, and he's an Israeli historian, he's a Jewish Israeli historian, probably the most profound, the most knowledgeable historian on the matter. He documented these in his book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. And it talks about the massacres that took place all the way up till 1948 and afterwards. And there are many massacres that took place after 1948 throughout the years, in 1956 in Gaza, in the 1970s, in the 1990s, and so on, all the way up till the current day. And since October 7th till today, there have been many massacres as well. Almost every day there's a massacre. Hundreds of people are being killed on a daily basis. So this whole issue, what's taking place now, did not start on October 7th. It preceded that by decades. But the mainstream media, they don't cover everything that's been going on regarding to 130,000 home demolitions throughout decades in Palestine. They don't talk about the tens of thousands of Palestinian political prisoners in Palestine who have been unjustly imprisoned by Israel and tortured by Israeli authorities. They don't talk about the illegal Israeli occupation that began in 1967. They don't talk about many things. This did not start on October 7th. And this brings us all the way up to the blockade that began, the full blockade that began in 2006 up till today. The collective punishment on 2.3 million people of Gaza. Finally, the Palestinian people in Gaza said enough is enough. And they resisted. And resistance is a legal form of fighting the occupier according to international law. I'm talking about armed resistance. Go back and look at international law, the Geneva Conventions. Armed resistance is legitimate according to international law. I'm not talking about killing civilians. Killing civilians on any side is condemnable. But what I'm talking about is armed resistance against the occupation. And this is what people need to keep in mind. This didn't start on October 7th. It had started decades before October 7th.
Especially the from the settlers, Israeli settler violence has increased in the past few years, and as you mentioned, even more so after October 7th, to the degree that based on the news I've been following, there are Palestinians in West Bank leaving their kind of small villages and going to places where there are more bigger towns in the West Bank, because they are afraid that they will be murdered by Israeli settlers, and those pogroms since October 7th, it's over 100 and it's around 130, I believe. Last time I checked, last week. We have a few questions. One, again, from an anonymous attendee. What would it mean for the world, future conflicts, and society if Israel were to be successful in their endeavor, considering that this is the first time that the world can so closely follow for the first time?
Well, if Israel is successful in its endeavor, then this would be, in my view, catastrophic to the world, because I firmly believe that injustice in one place is an injustice everywhere. So if Israel is allowed to continue with its barbaric actions, what's going to prevent other entities and other dark, evil powers in the world to undertake similar genocides in the future? If we allow this genocide to continue, what's going to stop other entities from undertaking other genocides elsewhere? If Israel isn't stopped, we are going into a very, very dark place. And I'm not trying to exaggerate. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here. But this is a very serious situation. We need to stop them. Otherwise, the whole world is going into a dark place.
I agree. Actually, a question from, did I read the, a question from another anonymous attendee. Do you have an insight on why US and other big powers are so uncomfortable saying and doing the right thing and compelled to support Israel no matter what?
It's a big question. I mean, and we could look at it from various dimensions. Sometimes people look at it from the dimension of corporate interests. Other people look at it from the perspective of the military-industrial complex. Other people, such as Walt and Mearsheimer, might highlight the dimension of AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, the biggest lobby in Washington after the NRA. Also, I think maybe the media, which is facilitating this, also plays a role. So there are a lot of dimensions involved here. There's no easy answer to that question. That's probably one of the biggest questions out there. And scholars much more knowledgeable and smarter than me have been tackling that for years, including Noam Chomsky and others. But I think it's related to all of these dimensions that I talked about.
I agree. Thank you for kind of drawing a picture of the complexity of why the US and other Western nations are actually are not willing to do the right thing. We can probably add that they're afraid they would lose any power and control over the Gulf region if Israel is not there. Right.
That's true. And here we have the convergence of economic interests with petroleum, with the subservient Arab regimes that do Washington's bidding in the area. They do Washington's bidding in part because Israel exists as an outpost or a colony for the US. So yeah, I agree with you. It's a convergence of all of these things.
Cassandra asks, Cassandra Crook, what can we do to counteract this misinformation being put out and stop this killing?
Well, there are a number of things that we can do, and sometimes many of us, including myself, might feel helpless at times. But even as individuals, there are many things that we can do, and we should never underestimate the power of individuals and what individuals can do. We can make a difference. For one thing, we could start to promote awareness amongst other people around us, as I had alluded to before, whether these people are family members, neighbors, friends, colleagues, co-workers, etc. Another thing is that we can start to engage in acts of protest and civil disobedience. Another thing that can be done is contacting our politicians, our representatives in Congress, or even our local politicians. If we claim that we live in democracies and, the power of the vote is what drives people to take office or occupy office, then, we could call up the politicians and say, hey, how do you feel on this issue of human rights? Are you going to take a stand on it? Are you going to issue a statement on it? Are you going to stop this or that policy? If the answer is no, guess what? You're not going to get our vote in the next election cycle. So there are things that we can do, even as individuals, that will make an impact. Many times we fall into this trap of feeling helpless. But if we all work together, there are things that we all can do to change the future for the better. And these are just some of the simple things that we can do. We can, in addition to protesting, calling our politicians, promoting awareness, there's also donations that can be done to support human rights issues, humanitarian issues, constructive media outlets, support them, because a lot of these media outlets, they live who are not beholden to corporate interests. The way they survive is through the generous donations of supporters around the world. And so without these alternative media outlets, there would be actually almost no voice. So that's another thing that people can donate to or support in any way they can. So these are just a few things that people can do to get more involved. And I would suggest that a good starting point would be to look at those media outlets that have been listed in the chat and start researching those. A lot of those outlets do have good links on them to other entities like human rights entities and so on. And I would like to take this opportunity as well to say, if anybody wants to contact me directly in the future, you could do so through my website, truthlostat.sea.com. And I'd be happy to correspond with anybody who wants to get further involved in these types of issues and get more active as well.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Thank you. And such. And we can probably see lots of, blouses and like signs on the screen. Thank you, everyone. We have 2 more questions, and then we have to end our event. Abdul Bari asks, I think getting educated on the matter is the best way to go about this. The only problem is that one side tends to revise history to fit their narrative. One of the good historians I like listening to is Norman Finkelstein, Ilan Pape, Gabor Mate, and Lenny Brenner. Oh, thank you for your comment, Abdul Bari. We have a question from an anonymous attendee. I have seen people draw attention to the danger of human trafficking in the light of the unlawful arrests, especially with people being stateless. Is there any way to draw more attention to this internationally and prohibit this from happening? So is there any way to draw more attention to the danger of human trafficking in light of the unlawful arrests? I am not sure if I completely understand the question, but maybe you can, maybe I don't know the background.
To be honest, I'm not sure I understand the question either. It seems more relating to human trafficking than it is to, so I'm not sure I understand the question either, to be honest with you.
Okay, I think I understand. It's when the people are stateless, then and if they're not in the refugee status, then they will be arrested, right? And so I think that is, and I think this is in terms of a concern of Palestinians, who have to run away from, being murdered by.
Or maybe it's meant for all the children now who are orphans.
Oh, that could be actually, yeah, referring to that as well, because unfortunately those kids probably, there will be danger of human traffickers. Oh my God.
I'm sure that is a possibility. I actually wasn't even thinking of that before, but it's a very good point that the participant brings up. And I don't know too much about that field, to be quite honest, to speak intelligently about it. But it is something that I should definitely look into further.
Mm-hmm. We have 2 more questions. One is, do you consider tax striking as a powerful form of civil disobedience? And such as like withdrawing all funds from bank accounts?
What is meant by tax striking? Does that mean not paying taxes?
Not paying tax, yeah.
Okay.
And
well,
also,
I do know some fellow activists in the US who do do that, actually. And it's interesting that withdrawing funds from bank accounts was brought up, because this came to my attention just today or yesterday, actually. And I thought it was a great idea. I mean, when people, any movement, any type of action that people take en masse that attracts the attention of the powers that be and has the ability to shake them, I believe is worth pursuing. And so if withdrawing all funds from bank accounts en masse by hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people across the country will make an impact, I would say, sure, I believe that would definitely be a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially if it's done at the very, very same time, that would
yeah
cause a lot of cash shortage.
Because unfortunately, we're dealing with people, politicians who, I'm not going to say all of them, but many of them are unconscientious. They work for their own interests, personal interests, corporate interests, whatever. They really have no empathy, many of them, or no empathy or no sympathy for people being killed unjustly far away. And so if, addressing these matters comes about by attacking their wallets, so to speak, by influencing their well-being financially, if that's the only way to change the status quo, then so be it. Let's change the status quo doing that.
Yeah. We also have
I just want to say that today, November 9th, was announced as a day to shut it down. And basically, it's a call for boycott across the United States, not to buy, not to, engage in any financial transaction in protest as like a form of protest. So just wanted to mention that it's all over the United States in different forms, of course.
Thank you for mentioning that. I hadn't heard of that. All right. We have a question. It says, were you allowed to visit Palestine after the incident?
No, I was not. When we were arrested after they took control of the ship, they took the ship to the port and they imprisoned all of the activists aboard all of the ships. So all of the 6 vessels, including the main ship that I was on, were taken to a port, and the hundreds of activists who were aboard these vessels were imprisoned. We were thrown in Israeli prisons, as I mentioned in the film. And they treated us like common criminals. They took our fingerprints, our mug shots, and they actually asked us or demanded from us to sign a paper stating that we entered Israel illegally, even though they had kidnapped us in international waters. And they also mentioned to us that we would not be allowed to enter into the country, what they call Israel, what I call Palestine, for about 10 years or so. I did not attempt to go after the flotilla, but friends of mine who were on the ship did attempt to go. Friends of mine who do have dual nationalities. And even with their European passports, they were returned at the border and they were not allowed in. So I figured I might as well not bother or waste my time because they're going to turn me back as well. Now, after 2020, since that was the lapse of 10 years, I wanted to go to Palestine. However, what happened, as you all know, COVID hit and there were travel restrictions and I could not go in that time frame. Now that COVID is over, hopefully I will get a chance to attempt to enter into Palestine, and we'll see what happens. I don't know if they'll let me in or not, even though the 10 years have passed, but because of my activism, it wouldn't surprise me if they turn me back at the border again. But that's the price that I have to pay for doing the right thing and speaking up.
And thank you for your voice.
Thank you.
Well, I have one comment and one question, and that's going to be that has to be the absolute last ones. Unfortunately, we have to finish the event. So the comment says, a lot of Americans are so concerned about women having abortions as they identify themselves as pro-life, but it's okay that over 10,000 people are being killed. What an irony. And the question from an anonymous attendee starts as, I joined pretty late. I'm not sure if someone asked this. How is the phrase from the river to the sea being twisted as a phrase that symbolizes the freedom of Palestinians and the Palestinian plight, to a phrase that is considered a terrorist chant that spells the extermination of all Jews? This is what Congress thinks, and this is what they used against
Rashida Tlaib, yeah.
Tlaib, yeah. Mhm. And it is, yeah, her being censured is absolutely unacceptable as well. When people are twisting and contorting the truth, therefore silencing the truth, it becomes very messy to traverse waters. So it is, yeah. Is there a question in this? But maybe if you wanted to comment on the phrase and how it's used, how it's twisted to mean the extermination of all Jews.
Sure. I mean, I think the participant adequately stated twisting and contorting the truth, and that's exactly what it is, twisting and contorting the truth. Why is a call for freedom and justice for everybody considered a call for exterminating a certain group of people? I don't understand that. It's just a way to try and silence people from speaking out, the same way they try to misuse or throw around the label of anti-Semitism or accuse anybody of being an anti-Semite. They try to twist other phrases that are used, such as from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Of course, everybody wants Palestine to be free from the river to the sea, included myself included. Well, what does that mean? It means that everybody will be free. It means that you have human dignity for all, for everybody. You have human dignity for everybody. You have justice for everybody. You have freedom for everybody. You no longer live in an apartheid state from the river to the sea. What's wrong with that? How can that be twisted into something that is extermination of Jews is beyond me. But of course, it's another smear tactic that people use in order to shut down any opposition, in order to shut down the voices that are calling for the freedom and justice for Palestinians. And, you know, Congress knows this. They know that Tlaib means this, that she wants justice and freedom for all. But because she is a pro-Palestinian voice, and because they want to be reelected in their next cycle, and as we said, AIPAC is the biggest lobbying group in Washington, D.C. after NRA, they have to toe the line of what AIPAC expects of them. And speaking of AIPAC and Congress, I would also advise people to read the book of Mearsheimer and Walt, in which they discuss the power of AIPAC. But even before Mearsheimer and Walt's book, there were books by Paul Findley, who was a former Congress member and who lost his congressional seat years and years ago because of the stances that he took. So, you know, many Congress people and senators are beholden to the interests and to the lobbying power in Washington, D.C. But as I said, from the river to the sea, there's nothing wrong with that phrase. I say it all the time, and I will continue to say it because I demand justice and freedom for all.
Thank you, Mr. Aude. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your film. Thank you for answering our questions. We cannot thank you enough.
No, thank you. I appreciate you hosting me, and I appreciate all of the wonderful questions from the students. You know, it's usually the students and the younger generation who pose the best questions, and they've proved that again tonight. So a lot of them were tough questions, but I hope I handled them as best that I could. Thank you, and thanks to all of the attendees for coming and watching the film. And like I said, there's a lot that we can do as individuals. Please try and promote not only my film, but promote awareness with your fellow colleagues, coworkers, family, and friends. And hopefully together we can make this world a better place.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you to all of you for your questions and for your attendance.
We're going to close the webinar now.
Yes,
Thank you.